So Nova Scotia in 1989 tried to pass a law that stopped anyone from having abortions in a setting that wasn't a hospital, according to like basically a few criteria that they laid out. So
and that sounds on the surface like a reasonable thing until you remember that there are pill abortions.
Yeah.
And that those are included in abortions.
Well, yeah, I don't know if in the 70s pill abortions were, common or whatever. I'm not sure. Maybe they were. But regardless, like, there's a difference between a clinic and a hospital.
Right.
They basically set out a list of criteria that said this is a hospital. This is what a hospital is, so this is where you're allowed to have an abortion. And obviously that means you can't have it in a clinic, you can't have it this. It reduces access.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I find people don't really consider laws in the way that they should. They just read the words and think this sounds fine.
Yeah.
That's not how laws work.
Yeah.
At all. A law can look fine on the surface, but its implementation could mean that it has sort of unforeseen effects, or rather foreseen effects that people hope you will overlook. It's not all, for example, sort of what they called Jim Crow laws. It's not like that where it's like, yes, black people are second-class citizens, and it says so in the law. There are laws that mean that, certain groups of people have less access to certain resources, not explicitly in the law itself, but just the way that it's implemented. And in this case here, absolutely the same thing. You could say, oh, here's a list of criteria where you could get an abortion from a hospital. Totally fine. Well, if the list of criteria aren't, mean that on a technicality, some places aren't considered hospital settings, that's an issue. Having no clinics means that's an issue. If you're in a place where you can't easily access one of their approved hospitals, what are you going to do? Travel across the country, travel across the province to do it? It might be difficult for you if you've got a job. If you've got a job, you might not be able to take the time off, all of that sort of stuff. Like, so it just limits access. So while it may seem reasonable, just don't put these kinds of, whenever you see these kinds of regulations on things like this, generally it's just to limit access. Same with like voting rights, right? Or with voter ID. It doesn't seem like it's a thing that would impact certain communities more than others, but it does. It literally just does. Like you can look at the sort of the stats on it, and it seems fine up front. Like, oh yeah, ID to vote. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem is
ID for other things.
Yeah, the problem is that
one more?
it impacts some communities more than others.
Yeah.